Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve. This is V-Diffuser. In our last episode, we investigated the machine up there along with Barrack von Zeeks. And Kazuma may actually be alive. Maybe. Anywho, we figured out all we can figure out here. It's time to go to the forensics laboratory. Nice place. I believe this is it. Dr. C's laboratory. That chemical smell really assaults the nose. And there's plenty to assault the eyes in here, too. It looks as though the doctor isn't here. But we're here now, so we may as well do some sightseeing, don't you think? What a seasoned tourist you've become, Miss Susato. We just have a little look around. Being careful not to upset any restless souls. Where do we examine? The book on the desk. A little light reading. Look at this big thick book here. It appears to be an accounting ledger. It's a record of the forensic investigation team's spending, I think. Oh? What is it? It's clear the team purchases various equipment and supplies on a monthly basis, but... well, one entry seems rather strange. They're buying 500 scalpels every month. 500? That is either waste or someone's extorting her. They must be working really hard on dissecting corpses. I don't know. Judicial autopsies are only carried out in certain special circumstances. And scalpel blades can be sharpened, too. It does seem a bit strange, you're right. 500 scalpels a month. What would they possibly be using all of them for? What are you doing? Hey! There she is. It's something we wanted to ask you, but we weren't here, so. So, you thought you'd snoop around. That's acceptable to you people from the East, is it? Well, what do you want? Lord Strongheart told us, you see, that it was you who examined the victim's body. Mr. Asman's body, I mean. So we came to ask you about your findings. On Lord Strongheart's advice. Very well. If the Lord Chief Justice has given his consent, I'll tell you what our investigation revealed. But when we're done, you must leave immediately. Alrighty. So, you want to know what the forensic investigation team determined from its examination of the scene? The victim, Mr. Odie Asman, who disappeared from the experimentation stage amid an explosion, and Mr. Asman, who appeared moments later partway up in the Crystal Tower, were without question one and the same person. That is the team's conclusion. That can't be right. If it was an elaborate trick, we can only speculate about how it was carried out. Let's see. If two people who looked very similar to each other were involved, they could have made it appear as one single person had switched places, couldn't they? Very true, but sadly in this instance, that was not the case. The man who disappeared and the man who subsequently reappeared was the same person. The fingerprints at the scene make that quite evident. Ah, fingerprints. They're not yet officially recognized as forensic evidence in the British justice system. But one day, they will be used as an investigative aid in the matter, of course. Oh my. But that would mean, in the instantaneous kinesis actually took place. So where does that leave us? My team was tasked with the investigating, not drawing conclusions. Instantaneous kinesis. is impossible, yet the body did move from one place to the other. This hasn't cleared up anything at all. It made the whole thing even more of a mystery. Mama, what is this? Hey! Where did she spring from? And did you just call the doctor Mama? This is a lawyer, dear. Oh! Hello? To meet you. Pleased to meet you. Yes, I'm a defense lawyer. Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Mama? Yes. Can I cut this one up? Please, no! What? I've never seen inside an Eastern person before. I want to know what it looks like. Let's not! Of course you can't. It's a live specimen, as you can very well see. Boring. I think I just had a near-death experience. Oh dear, Mr. Naruhodo, you're as pale as a corpse. And let's leave before I'm mistaken for one. Well, I think we've done all the investigating we can here for now. If we could just determine the whereabouts of Mr. Drebber. I'm sure Gina and little Toby won't let us down. Now then, you think we ought to try to speak with Mr. Sholmes at this point? We have things to discuss, and I'm dying to meet him again after all these months. Alright, back to Madame, to spells. Oh my, no wonder it's called the House of Horrors. I'd like to turn on my heels and go straight home, via the confectionery. Being scared makes you crave sweets. I can understand that. But you know, there's something about that waxwork over there. It looks exactly like Mr. Sholmes down to the very last detail. That's because it is him. Sorry, I just think you'll find that's the temporary waxwork himself. The friend of my dedicated employee. Hello again, it's Ryunosuke. Ryunosuke Naruhodo. I must say I am quite spellbound by the great detective. He's a marvel. My precious waxwork is already back where it belongs. You don't mean... But yes, the mystery is solved already. Wow. Sholmes can really engage his brain when he's hungry enough. So as you can see, he has returned to his habitual duties. Hello. Do not disturb. Well, we have to. She looks very perplexed. She's going to. We really do need to speak with Mr. Sholmes, and I am longing to say hello again. I think you might find he's quite nearby, actually. Oh! What? What are you... Indeed, my dear fellows, it is I. The world-famous great detective in waxwork, Sherlock Sholmes. Susato-san! Susato-san! My most humble apologies. I thought I died and gone to eternal paradise for a moment, via London. My dear madam, allow me to make amends by offering you a tasty free deduction at some point. long as it's not of questionable street fruit quality. I don't understand. Why are you working as a waxwork here, Mr. Sholmes? Merely a secret identity, you understand. The case is largely solved now. Largely solved? We're talking about the waxwork abduction, I presume. Indeed we are, my good fellow. As I predicted, it was as easy as proverbial pie. Though I confess, I'm yet to partake of a pie, proverbial or otherwise, or any food so far today as a matter. So I hear. So how'd you manage to solve it so quickly? Well, do remember I said it was largely solved. I simply negotiated with the culprit. Are you familiar with the so-called telephone? Oh yes, it's a most modern invention allowing you to hold a conversation with people far away. In Japan, only the imperial capital and a handful of other cities are connected yet. Then this morning, a telephone call was received here from the perpetrator of the abduction. As such, I was able to negotiate terms, and in the end, the waxwork was returned. That's amazing. Just between you and I, it would appear the culprit had always intended to return the stolen waxworks in any event. But I thought whoever was responsible had demanded a ransom, no? Yes, I think perhaps the ransom demand was necessary to avoid unwanted suspicion regarding the true motive. But does that not mean your negotiating was entirely unnecessary? The fact that I must ask you to keep from Madame Tispel's at all costs. A hungry young Iris awaits my return to Baker Street, after all. Poor Iris. Now then, do I sense you have some business with this great waxwork? Yeah, we sure do. Enoch Trevor. We're in the process of trying to track somebody down. Oh? Yes, a man by the name of Enoch Trevor. He's a swindler who duped Professor Hairbrain and the engineer who built the kinesis machine. A swindler and an engineer. Quite the modern man. He also seems to be a conjurer of sorts, too, with considerable knowledge of stage magic. We really need to locate him before the trial resumes tomorrow morning. We have so few clues to go on, that's the trouble. Do you have any good ideas? I have no data yet. It is a capital mistake to have good ideas before one has data. If I knew something of the man's appearance at least, I may be in a better position to help. Oh, we can do that. Yeah, Drebber's appearance. Fortunately for you, however, presently I have little to occupy myself and little to fill my stomach. As soon as you find any clue, no matter how small, I should gladly give you my thoughts on it. Mr. Sholmes, did you lie to us? My dear Mr. Naruhodo, say that piercing stare. What is this about? Last winter, when we were first on our way to Britain aboard the steamship. Your words were very clear. So then, let us unravel this mystery, and discover what events led to this curious murder. You told us that it was murder, and you examined Kazuma-sama's body. Indeed, and wherein lies the problem? We met him earlier today, the victim, Kazuma Asogi. You're quite sure? He was wearing some sort of mask, and was apparently suffering from amnesia. But yes, I'm quite sure. It was Kazuma-sama. You must have known at the time, Mr. Sholmes, that he wasn't actually dead. Well, I can only assume I was swept up in the murderous atmosphere at the moment. But the fellow wasn't dead at all. Priceless. I don't suppose that performance would pass muster, would it, Mr. Naruhodo? I could believe that the crewman present at the time made a mistake. But not you, Mr. Sholmes. I will now tell you something of the first importance, my dear fellow. Great detectives are wont to lie. It will serve you well to remember that. Please, Mr. Sholmes. Tomorrow in court, you will find yourself on the threshold of a very great mystery. For now, I'm afraid that is all I can say. Geez, Sherlock Holmes or Sherlock Sholmes sure is not talking to us. We, however, can present this to him. Mr. Sholmes, would you cast your eyes over this photographic print? It's of Mr. Enoch Drebber. The face of the engineer we seek. Well, all Englishmen look broadly the same, of course. So looking at the photograph won't be particularly instructive. Are you alright, Mr. Sholmes? Ah, yes, forgive me. Very interesting, this. Very interesting indeed. What's wrong, Mr. Sholmes? You've turned quite pale all of a sudden. I have a suggestion, Mr. Naruhodo. Will you indulge me? Well, what is it? As I explained to you when you arrived, the missing waxwork has been returned, and I personally reinstalled it in the exhibit from which it was taken, behind those thick curtains. The Professor exhibit, isn't it? Would you like to see it for a mere 5 shillings? That's a special one-time only price, you understand. It won't come again, I might add. Would you like to see the fruits of my labor? The price is a very reasonable 5 shillings. I think you'll find it's well worth it. He's not letting us go. Are you being quite serious, Mr. Sholmes? Ascertain, is this seriousness or silliness? I can never tell with you. That's the point. It couldn't hurt. Here's your 5 shillings. Let's see what's behind the curtain. Well, the money's been spent, so... special exhibit time. Doesn't seem somehow that Mr. Sholmes slipped money in his own pocket, does he? We could ask Gina to retrieve it for us, using her special skills. Pickpocketing police officers and diddling detectives. Is this what makes Britain great? Not to mention demigod prosecutors taking the law into their own hands or chip-loving inspectors. Inspector Gregson comes off rather well in that list, I think. Alrighty. What have we got to see? Good Lord, he's missing his head. Oh dear. I felt a shiver run down my spine as soon as I walked in here. Miss Susato, I say we turn on our heels and go straight home via a really big confectionery. We certainly can't do that. We paid 5 shillings already. True. Actually, now that I'm looking at it a little more closely, we've paid good money to see an exhibit that's clearly incomplete. The nerve of that great diddling detective is far more terrifying than anything else in this place. This must be what Mr. Sholmes meant when he said the case was largely solved. Be that as it may, Mr. Sholmes heavily implied there be a clue about the engineer in here, didn't he? But where? Well, we paid 5 shillings, so let's do 5 shillings worth of investigation, shall we? Is that fear or frustration that's making Susato-san's voice tremble? Well, one, let's address the elephant in the room. This must be the killer, the fiend known as the Professor. According to what Madame Tispel said, he killed 5 victims, all of noble or royal blood. The waxwork is so lifelike, isn't it? Like all the models in this place. Looks like it could start moving at any moment, doesn't it? If only it had a head, that is. Perhaps we should examine it in a little more detail. So this is the condemned man, the so-called professor. Then perhaps his head was chopped off by a guillotine. But unable to find peace, he emerged from his grave as a headless ghost. Do we have to entertain such terrifying ideas, Mr. Zato? Anyway, I'm sure the model had a head once. There's a metal fitting for it, see? Then perhaps Mr. Sholmes absent-mindedly forgot to reattach it. That's an extremely absent-minded detective you're describing, isn't it? Or perhaps the thief absent-mindedly forgot to include the head when he or she returned it to the museum. And that would be an extremely absent-minded thief. Could there have been some reason why only the head wasn't returned? Well, whatever the reason, it means we don't know what the face of the infamous professor looked like, do we? Oh. There's something caught just inside the convict's jacket. It's glass! And quite big, too. It's very thick, about 5 times thicker than a normal window glazing, I'd say. Where did it have come from, I wonder? Increase its strength. But why? Well, perhaps because the glass had to span a particularly wide area, such as a big building, for example. You don't mean the Crystal Tower at the Great Exhibition. But why would glass from the Crystal Tower be lodged inside this waxwork's jacket? Makes you think, doesn't it? Earlier in court, we established the kinesis experiment was a trick. And now we discover this fragment of glass here in this waxwork. Coincidence? Who knows? The man with the lantern. This part of the experiment is just as disturbing as the rest. It looks so real. He seems to be a young man in a white overcoat. And he has a large shovel in his hand, too. Look. Perhaps we should investigate a little more detail. What's this here? Well, this would appear to be a lens in the middle, so I believe it's probably a camera. British technology is incredible, isn't it? I mean, what about Mr. Sholmes' skin print? I think perhaps you should treat Mr. Sholmes' inventions as exceptions to the rule. Why would a man be in a graveyard at night with a camera? I wonder. Perhaps he was trying to capture the moment a dead body came back as a ghost on film. We'll just borrow this for a little while, I think. What's a photographic plate? It's a piece of glass coated in a special emulsion that reacts to the light coming through the lens. If we open the cover at the back of the camera, we should find it. Let's have a look. You should see yourself, Susato-san. You really do like machinery, don't you? I can't see his face very well, can you? Perhaps if I just... Oh! Do you think we should be manhandling the exhibits, Mr. Naruhodo? I'll put it back exactly as it was, don't worry. It's Enoch Drebber. What on earth? How can... I don't believe it. A black monocle. Mr. Naruhodo, is it possible this man is... Yeah. It's Enoch Drebber. The color of his hair is different, but it's unmistakably him. Indeed it is. Mr. Sholmes! This man is the subject of your present hunt, I believe. That's right. Just who is this man? Why is he here in this exhibit? And why does the convict behind him have no head? The head was missing when the model was returned by the thief who stole it. What a surprise. So then the case isn't yet solved, is it? Did I not say so myself? Largely solved, were my words, I believe. But I must locate the missing head, tout de suite, as Madame would say, or I'll be in grave trouble. A very hungry iris still awaits my return to Baker Street, preferably with rations. Ugh! Do you know, though, something about this room is strange. What do you mean? Well, the displays in the House of Horrors are supposedly to depict real events, are they not? Indeed they are, Miss Susato. Do go on. And, as terrifying as they are, the scenes in the other exhibits are believable. But this one... this surely couldn't ever really have happened, could it? I think it's time I educated you a little about the nature of the incidents involving the professor 10 years ago. Alrighty, here we go. The resurrecting convict. I believe I told you a little bit about the professor yesterday, did I not? He took the lives of 5 victims, every one being either a member of the aristocracy or royalty. All were attacked by an enormous hunting hound and had their throats ripped from their bodies. Oh gosh, an enormous hound! How awful. After taking the life of his 5th victim, the killer was apprehended. It was a case of unprecedented magnitude in Britain, you must understand. Accordingly, the professor was tried in a closed court. No members of the public were admitted. A closed court? So you mean that the professor's identity... As you've surmised, my dear fellow, his identity was never made public. Naturally, he was found guilty, and was summarily sentenced to death by hanging. He was buried in a grave at Lowgate Cemetery, which adjoins the rear of the prison where he had been held. However, that was not the end of the affair. Oh. The very night that he was buried, the convicted man came back to life. He came back. He clawed his way out of the ground and emerged into the moonlight graveyard. The exhibit here depicts that very scene, as described by the sole witness to those chilling events. There was a witness, but of course, my dear fellow, it was none other than that young man in the white overcoat, Enoch Drebber. He saw it happen. So this is a waxwork model of Enoch Drebber. 10 years ago, the convicted professor, having been gibbeted and buried, emerged from his grave in the dead of night. The sole witness to that unimaginable scene was this young man. From appearance, I would say he was about 20 years old. It's so horrifying. Scared out of his wits, the young Drebber ran to a nearby police station to report the incident. And the sheer terror of what he'd seen is said to have turned his hair white overnight. Yep, as shown in the photograph we have of him, his hair is completely white. For the following few days, the story of what he'd seen was on every front page in the capital. The public was frantic for every last detail about the killer who'd come back to life. As you've seen, an exhibit was even created here at Madame Tuspel's. I can quite understand why the man's hair turned white, certainly. But what I don't understand is what Mr. Drebber was doing in the first place, in a lonely graveyard in the middle of the night. What was he up to? professor's acts of terror threw London's upper classes into complete panic 10 years ago. It was a great scandal, one might say, at the very highest levels of society. And since the killer's identity was never made public, rumors abounded. After all, no killer had ever before systematically employed a dog as a weapon of murder. Yes, I can imagine the impact the case must have had. But in time, of course, the rumors abated. So too did talk of the shocking witness account of the convict who came back to life. It was forgotten, dismissed as a dubious ghost story, as a preposterous parlor tale. But why did people stop believing it? Why? Simply because there was no resurrection to speak of, as was established in fact. What do you mean by no resurrection? The police investigated the grave in London, Lowgate Cemetery, and published their findings. The convict's body was found to be buried exactly where it had been following the execution. No! But that would mean Mr. Drebber must have lied to the police and the newspapers. That would appear to be the only logical explanation, yes. The young man subsequently vanished from society, and nothing had been heard of him since. It's rather striking, then, that he should resurface now, don't you think? Of course, the convicted murderer couldn't really have come back to life. That's not possible. But Drebber's hair is unusually white, and if that really did happen overnight as a result of shock, it's hard to believe the incident was an out-and-out lie. Ah! What the pleading Nora? What have you gone and done? Gina, what are you doing here? I asked Iris, and she said this is where you'd be. So, Gina, that's allowed in the museum. Madame Tispels will have you take a position as a waxwork if you're not careful. I think there might be a more pressing concern. I still had some flesh powder left from 6 months ago, so... Alright, Gina, we understand. Please, put down the gun. Let's figure it out. Sorry, I got scared. And we'll figure out what's going on next time.